Ego is one of the most deceptive forces in our lives because it rarely shows up as what it really is. It doesn't knock on the door and announce itself. No, it slips in quietly, wearing a mask. And the most dangerous mask it wears is confidence. It convinces you that you're strong when you're actually scared. It convinces you that you're right when you're simply unwilling to listen. It disguises pride as self-respect. It calls arrogance high standards, but what it truly feeds on, what it thrives on, is insecurity. Deep, unresolved insecurity. You see, real confidence doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to posture or pretend. It doesn't need everyone in the room to agree. Real confidence is grounded. It's rooted in self-awareness and personal responsibility. But ego is loud. It's defensive. It needs to prove. It constantly seeks validation because underneath all the noise, it's afraid of being found out, afraid of being exposed as unsure, unworthy, or not enough. Ego is a cover-up job. It's a costume we wear when we don't feel secure in who we are. People confuse ego with power all the time. They think the person who talks the most, brags the loudest, or dominates every room must be the one in control. But more often than not, those are the ones hanging by a thread. Their identity is built on the applause of others. They're only as powerful as the approval they receive. And the moment they lose that approval, the whole thing crumbles. That's not confidence. That's a house of cards built on fear. Let's be honest, many of us were taught, maybe not directly, but by example, that showing confidence means always having the answer, always being strong, never showing weakness. So we adopted the performance. We started pretending. And at first it worked. People respected us, admired us, maybe even followed us. But over time, the weight of maintaining the act begins to drain you because you're not acting from a place of truth. You're acting from a place of fear. Fear of being seen as small, fear of being misunderstood, fear of not being good enough. So the ego gets louder and the soul gets quieter. Ego is not strength, it's armor. And when you're wearing armor all the time, it's impossible to move freely. It's impossible to connect deeply. It's impossible to evolve. Armor might keep you from getting hurt, but it also keeps you from feeling alive. It creates distance between who you are and who you're pretending to be. It builds a wall between you and your potential. And here's the tragedy. Most people don't even know they're operating from ego. They think they're being confident when really they're just protecting a wound. They think they're being leaders when really they're just afraid of being questioned. And what they don't realize is that ego left unchecked becomes the prison that keeps them from stepping into greatness. Because you can't grow while you're busy defending who you are. Growth requires vulnerability, it requires curiosity, it requires the courage to say, I don't know, or I was wrong, or I need help. But ego fights all of that. It sees humility as weakness, even though it's the foundation of all lasting success. You've probably seen it in others, and maybe even in yourself. The talented person who never reaches their potential because they refuse to listen. The entrepreneur who burns bridges because they can't admit mistakes. The athlete who stops improving because they believe they've already arrived. That's not confidence. That's the ego taking control. And slowly, dream by dream, it kills progress. Not with one dramatic blow, but with quiet resistance, with subtle denial, with the unwillingness to change. The truth is, ego doesn't want you to be your best. It wants you to look your best. It doesn't care about growth. It cares about perception. So it will push you to choose the path of least resistance, the one that keeps you in control, the one that avoids discomfort, the one where you don't have to admit you're still learning. But dreams are not built on control. They're built on evolution. And evolution requires humility. So if you want to build something meaningful, if you want to rise to your true potential, you have to be willing to take the mask off. You have to be willing to tell the truth, first to yourself and then to the world. Because once you see ego for what it is, it starts to lose its power. And in that space, something incredible happens. You stop performing and you start becoming. One of the most dangerous things ego does is it shuts your ears while opening your mouth. It makes you unteachable. And when you can't be taught, you can't be stretched. And if you can't stretch, you stay exactly where you are, stuck stubborn and silently drifting further from the future you say you want. Ego doesn't just resist correction, it resents it. It treats every suggestion as an insult, every piece of feedback as an attack. And before you know it, you're not listening to grow, you're listening to defend. Some people haven't outgrown their old patterns, not because they're incapable, but because they're unwilling. They've built a wall of ego so high that not even truth can climb over it. They don't want to be coached, they want to be praised. They don't want to be challenged, they want to be admired, but nothing worth having is born in that kind of comfort. Growth doesn't happen in echo chambers. It doesn't happen in applause. It happens when you allow yourself to be uncomfortable, to be told the truth, even when it stings. The saddest part? Most people don't even know they've stopped learning. They think experience equals mastery. They think age equals wisdom. But time doesn't teach anything unless you're paying attention. It's not the years that change you, it's the willingness to learn within those years. And when the ego takes over, that willingness fades. It makes you fall in love with your current level. That's where progress begins to die. Learning is a posture, a mindset. It's the decision to stay open even when you think you've arrived. Ego hates that posture. It tells you, you already know enough, you've heard this before, you're beyond this now. And the moment you buy into that lie, you start sinking. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, because no one notices the beginning of stagnation. It's subtle. You're still showing up, still checking the boxes, but inside you've stopped expanding. That leads into the next trap, this seductive illusion that says you are already enough. And don't misunderstand, there's a half-truth in that statement. Yes, your worth as a human being is not based on performance. Yes, you matter. Yes, you have inherent value. But ego doesn't use the phrase to heal you. It uses it to stall you. It takes what should empower your healing and uses it to justify your refusal to grow. Turn self-acceptance into self-deception. Because the dream you carry, the future you want, it doesn't care about how enough you feel today. It's not asking if you love yourself. It's asking if you're willing to evolve, if you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to shed what's safe in order to become what's possible. Ego doesn't want that journey. Ego wants you to settle. It wants you to tell yourself, I'm fine the way I am, not because it's true, but because it's easy. But you weren't born to stay fine. You were born to be excellent, to stretch, to sharpen, to rise. And rising means letting go of the false comfort that ego gives you. The comfort of pretending there's nothing more to do. The comfort of pretending you've already arrived. And here's the problem with that belief. When you think you've already arrived, you stop moving, you stop seeking, you stop listening to mentors, you ignore the warning signs. You start comparing downward instead of upward. You start measuring your growth against people doing less, not more. And all of that feels good for a little while, but deep down, you'll know. You'll feel the gap between who you are and who you're meant to be. And if you're honest, that gap will hurt more than any criticism ever could. He says, ego gives you short-term peace and long-term pain. It whispers, you've got this figured out, but leaves you empty when reality exposes the truth. That truth, you're not done. You're still under construction. And if you stop building now, everything you've worked for becomes unstable, because what got you here won't keep you here. The next level won't open with the last level's mindset. You can't enter the future carrying the ego of your past. Real confidence says, I am valuable. But real humility adds, and I have work to do. That's the combination that creates greatness, worth and work, security and stretch, self-belief and self-awareness. Ego tries to tear that balance apart. It wants you to believe that working on yourself means something's wrong with you, but that's not true. The most powerful people in the world are always evolving, they're always curious, always open, not because they're weak, but because they understand growth is not punishment, it's the privilege of the living. One of the most subtle ways ego ruins a person's potential is by shifting their focus. It turns your eyes away from the mission and points them toward the audience. Instead of chasing mastery, you start chasing approval. Instead of chasing results, you start chasing applause. And you don't even realize it's happening because on the surface, it still looks like progress. You're still moving, still doing, still performing, but underneath it all, your motivation has shifted from building something meaningful to being seen as meaningful. It happens to people in every walk of life. The artist who no longer paints to express but to impress. The entrepreneur who stops innovating because they're too afraid to lose the admiration of their peers. The leader who only speaks when the crowd is clapping. The student who learns not to grow but to be praised. Ego makes you more concerned with how you're perceived than who you're becoming, and that's a dangerous game. Because perception is fickle. It changes with the wind. Applause comes and goes. One day you're celebrated, the next you're forgotten. If your sense of value is tied to the volume of cheers, you'll spend your life performing instead of progressing. There's a moment in every journey when no one is clapping, no one is watching, no one is affirming you. And in that moment, the truth is revealed. Are you in it for the result or for the reaction? Because building anything real requires seasons of silence. It requires discipline in the dark. It requires doing the right thing even when no one is acknowledging it, sharing it, liking it, or applauding it. Ego can't survive that kind of environment. It starves in silence. It dies in obscurity, but purpose thrives there. Purpose is fed by impact, not attention. It's driven by vision, not vanity. And if you don't make that shift, if you don't break that addiction to applause, you'll forever trade long-term greatness for short-term validation. When ego takes over, the process becomes a performance. You start living for the highlight reel. You skip the foundation and reach for the stage. But here's the problem. Without the work behind the scenes, the show won't last. People will cheer for a moment, but only results earn respect. Only consistency earns credibility. Only real growth builds something that lasts. Ego will have you chasing likes and losing your legacy at the same time. And by the time you realize the applause has faded, it's often too late to go back and do the real work. And here's what makes it even worse. When someone tries to help you, when someone gives you feedback, ego doesn't receive it as support, it receives it as threat. That's the next trap. Ego turns every piece of feedback into a personal attack. It takes correction and twists it into criticism. It tells you that if someone is challenging you, they must not respect you. But the truth is the opposite. Real growth often begins with hard conversations. Real mentors don't flatter you, they sharpen you. And if you can't be corrected, you can't be trusted with success.
Some people would rather keep their pride than receive their breakthrough. They'd rather be told they're fine than be told the truth. But what they don't see is that every piece of honest feedback, every painful reflection, every uncomfortable moment of confrontation, it's all a gift. It's not an attack, it's not an insult, it's an invitation to rise. But ego will have you closing the door on that invitation. And what does that cost you? Opportunities, relationships, wisdom. The most dangerous lie ego tells you is they're trying to put you down. No. Most of the time, they're trying to lift you up. But the ego can't hear that because the ego is more concerned with protecting the image than improving the individual. So it reacts, it deflects, it finds reasons to discredit the source instead of receiving the message. They don't understand me. They're just jealous. They're too harsh. But deep down, you know the voice that spoke was trying to wake you up, not tear you down. You have to ask yourself, are you strong enough to be corrected? Are you humble enough to be coached? Are you secure enough to receive truth even when it hurts. Because the higher you climb, the more correction you'll need, not less. Success doesn't reduce the need for feedback, it magnifies it. The more you carry, the more weight your decisions hold, and the more responsibility you have to grow, ego will whisper that you've arrived. It will try to convince you that learning is for beginners. But that lie will cost you more than failure ever could. Ego doesn't just damage your goals. It damages your relationships. It builds walls where there should be bridges. It creates tension where there should be trust. And it leaves you wondering why people keep pulling away, why teams fall apart, why friendships feel surface level, and why you keep ending up isolated yet convinced it's everyone else's fault. But what you don't see when ego is in control is that you are the one making it difficult to connect. Ego makes you hard to talk to, hard to work with, hard to be vulnerable around. It turns every interaction into a power play. It creates this unspoken barrier between you and everyone else because you're too busy defending your image to let anyone in. People don't feel safe around ego. They may admire you, they may even follow you, but they won't trust you. And without trust, there is no loyalty. Without trust, there's no intimacy. Without trust, there is no depth. Ego feeds on the illusion that being untouchable means being powerful. But that's not power. That's loneliness dressed in pride. The truth is, real strength is found in connection, in openness, in the ability to say, I don't have it all figured out. Ego resists that vulnerability. It demands that you be right, even when you're hurting. It wants you to win every argument, even if it costs you every relationship. Some people wonder why they can't keep good people in their lives, why doors keep closing, why opportunities dry up. It's not always the outside world conspiring against you. Sometimes it's your ego making the room too small for anyone else to breathe in. Ego doesn't share space, it doesn't share credit, it doesn't share emotion, it dominates or disappears. And that kind of presence, no matter how talented, no matter how intelligent, becomes exhausting to be around. Eventually, even the most supportive people get tired of fighting for a place beside someone who only sees themselves. And if your life is full of shallow connections, if everyone is either beneath you or a threat to you, then what you have is not a network, it's a stage, and you are the only performer on it. This brings us to the next trap ego sets for your future. It blinds you to the bigger picture. You can't fulfill a vision bigger than yourself if you're obsessed with yourself. And ego by nature is self-obsession. It centers everything around your name, your status, your comfort, your spotlight. And here's the hard truth. The greater your vision, the less room there is for ego. Because real vision demands service. Real vision demands sacrifice. Real vision demands that you put the mission ahead of your pride, but ego doesn't serve. It wants to be served. You cannot build anything lasting while constantly asking, how does this make me look? That question will poison every decision. It'll keep you from taking necessary risks because you're afraid of embarrassment. It'll stop you from building strong teams because you can't stand sharing recognition. It'll keep you from empowering others because you're terrified they'll outshine you. That's not leadership, that's insecurity in disguise. The most powerful movements in history, the most transformative businesses, ministries, communities, and revolutions, they weren't built by people who were obsessed with themselves. They were built by people who became invisible to their own ego. People who were willing to be misunderstood for a season in order to leave a legacy for generations. People who stopped asking, what do I get out of this? And started asking, what can I give to this? But ego doesn't allow that kind of question. It only sees what it can take. It sees relationships as transactions. It sees teams as stepping stones. It sees every room as a stage, not a place to serve. And slowly, as ego grows, vision dies. Because vision requires humility. It requires admitting you need help. It requires collaboration. It requires listening. It requires giving up credit so others can grow. Ego is allergic to all of that. Eventually, you'll reach a point where your ego becomes the ceiling to your influence, your ability to inspire, to lead, to create change. It will hit a wall, not because you're not gifted, but because you refused to get out of your own way. The obsession with self becomes a cage. You might still look successful on the outside, but inside, the dream will suffocate. And the people around you, your team, your partner, your community, they will stop showing up with their full hearts because no one wants to build a future around someone who only sees themselves. So what does it all come down to? It comes down to this: ego is the great deceiver. It flatters you while it slowly empties you. It keeps you comfortable while keeping you small. It hands you the illusion of control while stealing your ability to grow. And if you don't get honest about it, if you don't confront it, challenge it, kill it, it will quietly dismantle everything you're trying to build. It will destroy your ability to learn. It will blind you to correction. It will push away the very people who were sent to help you. It will keep you chasing applause instead of purpose. It will trap you in a version of yourself that can't carry the weight of your own destiny. The truth is, ego can't coexist with greatness because ego makes it about you, and greatness always demands something bigger than you. It demands vision. It demands humility. It demands the courage to listen, to admit when you're wrong, to keep evolving, to let go of your pride so you can pick up your purpose. Some people lose their future because they were too proud to change, too proud to ask for help, too proud to admit they didn't know. Don't let that be your story. Don't let your ego write the final chapter of your life. There's a version of you waiting on the other side of your pride. Wiser, freer, stronger, more connected, more creative, more impactful. But you'll never meet that version if you keep protecting the image. So tear it down, piece by piece. And what you'll discover underneath is something far more powerful than pride: truth. And truth will take you where ego never could. If you want to go higher, you must first go deeper. And that journey begins when you stop asking, "How do I look?" and start asking, "Who am I becoming?" Because if you don't kill your ego, it will kill your dreams. And your dreams are far too valuable to be buried beneath your pride.